God that is appearing and is being called God in the Old Testament. Next slide. So our first pericope we want to look at is the angel of the Lord appearing to Gideon in Judges 6, verses 11 to 24. Key words we want to look for is the angel of the Lord sat under the oak. The Lord, not all caps, the angel and the angel of God. This is kind of a little bit of a longer passage. Is anybody interested? Bob, you want to go ahead?
The angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Bezerite. His son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon said to him, "Please tell me this, my Lord. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the wonderful acts our fathers told us about when they said, 'It is not the Lord who brought us up from Egypt, but now the Lord has forsaken us, and he has given us into the hand of Midian?' The Lord turned to him and said, 'Go forward in this strength that is now yours, and you will deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?' He said to the angel, 'Pardon me, my Lord, but how can I deliver Israel? Look, my clan is the lowliest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house.' But the Lord said to him, 'Surely I will be with you, and you will strike down Midian as one man.' Gideon said to him, 'If I have now found grace in your eyes, offer me a sign that it is you who are speaking with me. Please do not leave this spot until I come back to you. I will bring my gift and set it before you.' He said, 'I will sit here until you return.' So Gideon went and prepared a young goat, and he made unleavened bread from a half bushel of flour. He put the meat into a basket and the broth into a pot. He then brought them out to the angel under the oak, where he presented them. The angel of God said to him, 'Take the meat and the unleavened bread and set them on this rock and pour out the broth.' So that is what he did. The angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fire came up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. Gideon realized that this was the angel of the Lord, and he said, 'Oh no, it is the Lord God. Yes, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.' But the Lord said to him, 'Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. You will not die.' So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there, and he named it, 'The Lord is Peace.' To this day it stands at Ophrah of the Bezerites.
You know, if I was to tell you I actually knew how to pronounce that, I'd be lying. But I think it's Abiezrites.
What were his parents thinking when they gave him that name?
Well, they gave him the name Gideon. That was like the family name and the clan name.
No, I'm talking about the parents of Abiez.
Or whoever it was. All we can say is they weren't thinking in English. it might have sounded perfectly normal in their language to them at the time. So just running through the questions, which are mostly focused on the names in this section. In verse 11, what does the angel of the Lord do? Yes.
He came and sat down next to Gideon, but that I had a question related to that.
Mm-hmm.
It amazes me that the Lord can come and sit down next to Gideon, but like when Moses would talk to him, his face would glow, or sometimes Moses would have to hide, in a cleft of a rock or whatever.
Right.
So is his glory veiled?
Okay. Well. Oh, I see it's taped. All right. I don't know if that was a sign or not here. Well, yes, any time that God appears to a human, and he also at other times appeared to Moses and will at other people face to face, the glory has to be veiled. It's an appearance, but it's not the appearance of the full, bare essence of God, which no human being is able to handle. But here, yes,
Bob, you put your hand going up?
I think he's just adjusting his sleeve, unless I'm wrong. So it is notable here, though, that again, God seems to be appearing in a human type form, at least a form where God can sit under a tree. So that sitting is a creaturely word. And as we've seen before, God has appeared in the form of a man who's also identified, cross-referenced with some of the other names we've been looking at.
So,
Yes.
just looking at the whole thing, so, yeah, he's a man who can sit, he's a man who can talk, he gives all this stuff, he calls him a mighty warrior, the guy's hiding in a wine press for people saying that's not a mighty warrior to me, that
Right.
strikes me as funny. But anyway, he's telling him all this stuff like a mighty prophet, and then when he disappears, Gideon is like, oh, I was talking to God. I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense to me how he can have this whole thing, but then at the end it's like, ooh.
Well, right. Well, clearly, this is a person who is some kind of a prophet or seer, or has a connection with the Lord, and so I think Gideon realized that, and that's why he went to get a gift for him. And then
Prophets that were coming that they might be recorded in something, the secular histories that we don't have recorded in the Bible.
in this time period, there is no secular history that has survived to this day of this general time period, the Judges time period.
Okay, because because you have like Elijah and Elisha, okay,
Right.
those were very obvious prophets that are
Right.
showing up. But this one, it kind of is
So-
like a,
So how did Gideon recognize him as God? Ultimately, and we'll be getting there. Ultimately, we don't have the specific answer to it. But when he performed the miracle of consuming the flesh, again with the staff, so this is he's in a human form. So he performs the miracle of consuming the meat and then instantly disappears. So those are also two miraculous or divine accomplishments, so to speak. But we do have Gideon getting it, And we also have the text saying it, that this is the angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord is identified as God. And again, like the pattern we've been seeing a lot of times, there's clear identification of the angel of the Lord as God, but also there's a distinction made, and we'll get into that in the next few questions. So in verse 12, what does the angel of the Lord say to Gideon?
He identified himself as the Lord is with him. He identified himself as God.
Well, at that point, he's referring to the Lord in the third person. So he is the Lord, and he's talking about the Lord, a third person being with Gideon. And again, that's a pattern we've seen many times in these passages.
I would just say,
Yeah.
don't we have something similar after Jesus rises from the dead? He's talking to the two disciples on the way to Emmaus. They don't realize it's Jesus when he's talking to them.
Right.
It's not until he eats and then he disappears.
Appears.
And then they're like, whoa, that
Yeah.
was Jesus. So maybe it's the same thing here where the angel of the Lord, part of the humility of this appearance is he's covering up his glory until the time that he chooses to reveal it.
Right.
And then it becomes apparent.
I think that's probably the best answer to give about that. And I think you're right. There is a very definite parallel with that passage. And then it's going to be the same in the next one we look at as well.
And I think there's a comfort for us, because both here and in that account with the disciples on the way to Emmaus, like those guys said, weren't our hearts burning within us when he opened the scriptures to us? That Jesus wanted them to focus on his word when he wasn't physically there. And here, the angel of the Lord has this conversation and then vanishes as though to say, focus on the word, even when I'm not here.
Right.
So we do. We don't have Jesus physically present, but we have the word, and so we can focus on that and know that we have the Lord's presence with us and among us.
Right. So y'all are jumping to the spiritual importance here, and my questions are a little bit more pedestrian, but which means I'm glad for all your questions. So, after the angel Lord says, "The Lord is with you," then what does Gideon say in response? Where is he? We're suffering here. What I've heard about all these things, but I'm not seeing them in my life, and I think to that human response, I think is something that sometimes we can all relate to, because we're not seeing the mighty, spectacular act necessarily. And we're not seeing all the things God does to sustain us, all the opportunities God gives us to serve. We're not always seeing the value of what we're doing. We're not always seeing when God lets bad things happen. We're not always seeing how that corresponds with God being with us. Yes.
One thing I noticed in this verse and also in verse 15, when Jesus is responding, it's my Lord in small letters.
Right.
So I'm assuming at this point he doesn't know it's God.
Right. He's using Adonai, I believe, here. We talked, I don't know if you were there for the passage when we went through the three major names of the Lord. So he's using a term of respect here. He's not necessarily even using it as referring to God. But in verse 14, who responds to Gideon? So the angel Lord says something, Gideon says something back. Now who's talking? The Lord.
So was there a difference that Gideon could sense because of the difference in how it's referred to?
This is kind of the omniscient author speaking, or the narrator here when he's switching up these. When I say omniscient, that's kind of the literary term of, the author or narrator is telling you things that the characters don't necessarily know. And here, he's just switching back and forth between the angel and the Lord, as it's the same person in the same conversation, clearly from the context. Which one was I at? Okay, and then the next page, please. So in 14, the Lord answered, and then Gideon talks back in verse 15. Who does he speak to there? The angel. And then in verse 16, who's now speaking back to Gideon? The Lord. And 17, what does Gideon offer to the angel? A gift of food. And he brings it back to the angel in verse 19 to 20. How does the angel accept this gift? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he took the tip of the staff that was in his hand, and again here, this is his literal hand as it's appearing, and he touched the meat, and fire came up and consumed it. And also by vanishing. So he introduced himself, told him the task he's going to give Gideon, and vanishes as the angel of the Lord. So in verse 22, what does Gideon say? And he said also, "Oh no, it is." So, and again, and he says it 3 times. Yes, I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face. So here, it's the angel, it's God who is the angel. So the identification is pretty undeniable here in Judges chapter 6.
So if he disappeared,
Mm-hmm.
how was the Lord speaking to him, saying, "Peace be with you, do not be afraid, you will not die"? Was this a voice that came from heaven?
Yeah. So we don't have the answer for sure, but from this point on in the story of Gideon in this chapter and the next, there's a lot of back and forth again, and then it's just Gideon and the Lord. So it might be he's just speaking into him without appearing, and speaking into his mind or into his ears without appearing. We really don't have that laid out in the Bible in the way we can answer it definitively. And another theme we're getting at in verse 22 what does Gideon say about seeing the Lord face to face? He expresses fear, and God responds. And then what does God then say to Gideon to reassure him? Yeah. So our next slide, please. Yeah. With our answer, and then our note here, Judges chapter 6 is one of the clearest, is sustained identification of the angel of the Lord as the Lord in the Bible. And again, at the same time, in verse 12, the angel refers to the Lord in the third person. And as I mentioned before, the phenomenon of the angel being identified as God and also a distinction being made somehow from God. It's not just limited to the Pentateuch, where we saw that a number of times, but it continues into the rest of the Old Testament. So now I finally figured out how to do the widescreen, and just in time for it to curve over the end on y'all. So I might have been better keeping the old square format. So our next section is Judges 13, verses 2 to 24. And I think it's not a coincidence that the angel of the Lord comes probably to the two judges where we read the most about, like the extended stories. You have a number of judges that you have a few verses, then this judge defeated the whatever tribe and judged for 20 some years. But you have the extended stories of Gideon and Samson. I think they're the two longest ones. You have the angel of the Lord appearing. So here we have the angel of the Lord announcing the birth of Samson to his parents. Key words we have are the angel of the Lord, God, angel of God, man, and wonderful. So can I get a volunteer for this one? No, Pastor. Actually, no, Pastor, I'm going to save you for another one. So you can go, yeah.
Now there was a certain man from Zorah, from the clan of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren, and she had not given birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Listen, you are barren and have not given birth, but you will become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now please be careful. Do not drink wine or beer, and do not eat anything unclean. Do not eat anything unclean. Listen, you will become pregnant and give birth to a son. No razor is to touch his head, for the boy will be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from his mother's womb. He will begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines." The woman went and told her husband, "A man of God came to me, and he looked like an angel of God, very awesome. I did not ask where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, 'Listen, you will be pregnant and give birth to a son. So now do not drink wine or beer, and do not eat anything unclean, because the young man will be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from his mother's womb until the day of his death.' Then Manoah pleaded with the Lord, 'Please, Lord, the man of God whom you sent, please let him come to us again to teach us what we are to do for the young man who is to be born.' God heard the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God returned to the woman while she was sitting in the field. Once again her husband Manoah was not with her. The woman ran quickly and told her husband. She said to him, 'Come see, the man who appeared to me came to me again today.' Manoah then got up and followed his wife. He came to the man and said to him, 'Are you the man who spoke to my wife?' He answered, 'I am.' Manoah said, 'Now when your words come true, what will be the rule for the young man and his actions?' The angel of the Lord answered Manoah, 'The woman must be careful concerning everything I said to her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine. She must not drink wine or beer, and she must not eat any unclean thing. Everything that I commanded her, she must observe. Manoah then said to the angel of the Lord, May we persuade you to stay, so that we may prepare a young goat for you. But the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, Even if you keep me here, I will not eat any of your food. But if you make a burnt offering, offer it up to the Lord. Manoah did not yet know that he was the angel of the Lord. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, What is your name, so that we can honor you when your words come true? The angel of the Lord said to him, Why do you ask about my name? It is wonderful. Manoah took the young goat and the grain offering, and he offered them on the rock to the Lord, who did something wonderful as Manoah and his wife were watching. As the flame rose up from the altar toward the sky, the angel of the Lord ascended upward from the altar in the flame. Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell face down to the ground. The angel of the Lord did not appear to Manoah and his wife again, but now Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. Manoah said to his wife, We will certainly die because we have seen God. But his wife said to him, If the Lord wanted to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, and he would not have shown us all these things, nor would he have let us hear this message at this time.
All right. Everybody give her a hand. You did a good job. I was thinking of, having somebody else spell you in the middle, but you made it through. So, in verse 3, going way back, who appeared to Samson's mother, who's identified only as the wife of Manoah? The angel of the Lord. And then, how does she describe this angel to Manoah, her husband, in verse 5? First, she calls him or refers to him as a man. Yeah.
I think you mean there verse 6, Seth?
I could.
So,
Yes.
maybe it's from verse 6.
Yes, you are correct, and my apologies there. We're still kind of in beta here. In verse 16, how does the angel of the Lord respond to Manoah's offer of food?
That he wouldn't eat any of their food, but if they made a burnt offering to the Lord.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, we hit the aside in the text that he did not know yet that he was the angel of the Lord. And in verse 20, what does the angel do as Manoah makes his offering? I think we're ahead of.
He ascended upward from the altar in the flame.
Manoah fell face down to the ground.
Right. And then in verse 22, when Manoah realized it was the angel of the Lord, what did he say to his wife? Mm-hmm. And then in verse 18, what did his wife respond?
If he wanted to do it, he already would have done it.
Right. So again, there's always, whenever human beings come into contact with God or God's holiness, as sinful human beings, we have that instinctive reaction of fear. And if we've seen God, we're not worthy of being seen by God, and our life is in jeopardy. And that's always treated as a legitimate reaction whenever God appears. But God also comforts and appears. He wants his appearance to be known in a gospel way, not necessarily a law way. So when he appears, often he or an angel, the first thing they say is peace, or God is with you, God is for you. Where our first reaction as sinful human beings, if we were to actually come up against the holiness of God, is to be very conscious of our sinfulness. Yes?
Isn't there somewhere am I remembering right, that there's somewhere back in the law that says if you look on God, you would die or something like that? I'm trying to remember, is that true or is that just a?
Well, you do remember the unauthorized offerings of fire that Aaron's first two sons were actually killed by God for. So you have instances where the holiness of God is not being treated with respect. You have the person dying because they unauthorizedly put their hands on the Ark of the Covenant. And you have the destroying angel at times. So those are things that are just coming to the top of my head. I don't think that, unless some of the other pastors have something in mind, I don't think there's an actual command of, if an angel comes, don't look, or you're a dead person. Pastor?
I think you may be referring to Exodus 33, where Moses asked to see God in all of his glory.
Right.
God said, you
You can't do that and live.
But he said, that's God, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live.
That's what.
So, but one thing, when we went through that passage, we noted that it says that, but like just a few verses before, God is talking to Moses face to face. So there's some sort of distinction there between what's God doing through his appearances, and as the second person of the Trinity, versus what would happen if you came up against the full, unmediated essence of God. And I save what I think is the most important question about this, about Judges 13 for last. In verse 18, what does the angel of the Lord say about his name?
Exodus 33. Then the Lord said to Moses,
An unauthorized recording of Scripture. Yes, exactly. So when the angel says his name is wonderful, that word, the Hebrew word, only refers to divine. It's not like, oh, he's really awesome, or he's really cool or swell. It refers to wonder, as in signs and wonders, and it's always the signs and wonders being done by God, or by God's representative. So it's a divine reference, the word used here for wonderful. And it's also the same word in Isaiah 9 verse 6. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. The authority rule will rest on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So Judges 13 is, it connects angel of the Lord with all the names for God, or the two major names for God. It also connects the angel of the Lord with the messianic prophecy of Jesus when the angel says, "My name is wonderful." You have that connection there to the pretty clear messianic prophecy of Christ. 9 verse 6 I don't think is quoted in the New Testament, unless I'm wrong, but the earlier verses of that of Isaiah chapter 9 are quoted, I think in Matthew, when it's talking about Galilee and Jesus' ministry being in Galilee. So I would say here that Judges 13 is the second one of the three major passages, which in conjunction with the New Testament identify the angel of the Lord with Jesus. The first of these was Exodus 3, and then John 8:58, where Jesus puts himself in the burning bush as the Lord and the angel of the Lord. This passage here uses the description of the angel of the Lord's name as wonderful, which is also used as a name in Genesis 9, verse 6. And the third one is going to be Malachi 3, verse 1, in which both John the Baptist and Jesus are predicted. You have there a double angel passage. The first is usually translated messenger there, but you have a reference to both John the Baptist and Jesus in Malachi 3, verses 1. Those are the main connector passages, specifically from Jesus to the angel of the Lord. And you also have all the passages that are, again, following the pattern of John chapter 1, where the angel of the Lord, he's identified as God, and then there's a distinction between the angel of the Lord and God. And just as Jesus is identified as God and as the Son of God, you say both of those things about Jesus. And again, we would view this phenomenon as really only being possibly explained by the teaching of the Trinity. So this was in Judges, we had those three major angel of the Lord passages. And so we've kind of gone through our second wave of peak angel. And now we're going to be shifting to other of the names. And we will still see the angel later on in the Old Testament, not as much as we have up to this point. Roger.
Yeah, just like a little clarification, on your first page you had it referring to the physical appearances of Jesus, but now when we talk about in the cloud or in the bush or even an angel, is that almost as we would think is physical?
I said physical and not necessarily human. Okay? So physically, there's the appearance of that bush. Physically, there's the appearance of that cloud. And, the passages are talking about God being in that cloud, or the angel of the Lord being in the cloud, or the glory of the Lord being in that cloud.
Yeah, so something then physical that we would recognize as
Right. Not necessarily human, but always physical. All right. Can I get a volunteer for 1 Samuel 3? Go ahead.
Now the boy Samuel ministered to the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no widespread revelation. And it came to pass at that time, while Eli was laying down in his place, and when his eyes had begun to grow so dim that he could not see, and before the Lamb of God went out to the tabernacle of the Lord, where the ark of God was. And while Samuel was lying down, the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, "Here I am." So he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." And he said, "I did not call you. Lie down again." And he went and lay down. And then the Lord called yet again, "Samuel." So Samuel rose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." He answered, "I did not call you, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, nor was the word of the Lord yet revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. So he rose and went to Eli and said, Samuel and Shiloh by the word of the Lord.
All right. Let's just have a few questions about this section. What does 1 Samuel 3, verse 1 say about the word of the Lord? It is rare. And what else? What does it say, like, as an explanation or elaboration of the word of the Lord being rare? Okay. So, if you remember when we encountered the word of the Lord first in Genesis chapter 15, I talked about the word of the Lord, the formula, the word of the Lord coming to prophet X and saying. And the word of the Lord is connected to prophets. The word of the Lord comes to this or that various prophet. That's a formula that's used over and over in the Old Testament. So when we were getting closer to the prophets now, the word of the Lord is more frequent as the prophets become more frequent. And we're not going to go through every single time the word of the Lord comes to a prophet and says something. We've been looking at the times where it's clearly a back and forth conversation, and the word of the Lord is actually a physical or appearing as the Lord, a physical appearance of the Lord. In verse 10, what does the Lord do? Right. Again, we have a creaturely or a human action of standing. And then in verse 21, how did the Lord appear in Shiloh? By the word of the Lord. So I would understand this as a reference to him appearing again in a physical form. And because he's talking to a prophet, as is very frequent in the Bible, he is being referred to as the word of the Lord. So we're now at a point when we're getting into the history and the prophets where the word of the Lord is going to be used much more frequently than the angel. There is still going to be angel appearing, though. And next I have 1 Samuel 4, 19 to 22. Can I get someone to read that? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
His daughter-in-law, Phineas' wife, was pregnant and ready to give birth. When she heard the news that God's ark had been taken and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she crouched down and gave birth, because labor pains had come upon her. As her death approached, the woman who stood by her said to her, "Don't be afraid, for you have given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay attention. She named the boy Ichabod and said, "The glory is departed from Israel, because God's ark has been taken." And because of the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband, she said, "The glory has departed from Israel, because God's ark has been taken."
So what did Phineas' wife do after she heard that God's ark had been taken and that both her father-in-law and husband had passed away? So the judgment, we didn't go through with what the Lord actually told Solomon in Samuel in chapter 3. But if you remember, it was a prophecy about Eli and announcing God's judgment on Eli and his house. And now in chapter 4, we see it coming to pass. If you remember the story, they grabbed God's ark, took it to battle, thinking, okay, now this will be our ace in the hole against the Philistines. They lost the battle. The ark was taken, the sons were killed, and then Eli, when he was told the news, he fell off the back of his chair and broke his neck and died. And then we come to this section. What did she mean, though, when she said that the glory has departed from Israel? What exactly is she talking about? You know, when I first read this passage as a child, I thought it was something kind of generic. But it's actually something very specific. The ark, yeah. Why was that the key point, that the ark had been taken?
The glory of the Lord was between the seraphim.
Exactly. So you have that physical place. That's where the glory of the Lord and the Lord appeared. And I think there was, I could be wrong, but I think there's another reference to that as where the angel is. So that specific place, the glory of the Lord, has now left Israel because they took the ark. And to her, of all the disasters that were happening, that was the one that was most on her mind. So she died a believer in tragic circumstances, and I'd be very surprised if she weren't in heaven.
But wouldn't you refer to the reason of why it was left? You know, was that so many of the people had rejected or left their
Right.
faith in God, and then this was a result.
Right. And including the sons of Eli, who were leading people away in their corruption. And that was, but I guess my point is, I don't understand that as like a generic, the glory of the Lord, in the sense of God having nothing to do with the people, or even God rejecting the people. When she says the glory of the Lord has departed, because specifically the ark, the special place where the glory of the Lord resided, was gone. And that is what I think she's talking about here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the why, you know.
Why? Yeah, I agree with you about the why, yes. Okay. I do want to get into the temple here, and Pastor, I was going to save this one for you if you could.
Very good. You all got the key words we're looking for?
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, the Lord, the cloud, my name, the name of the Lord, and the God of Israel.
The priests brought the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the house, the most holy place, under the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim were spreading their wings over the place for the ark, so that the cherubim covered the ark and its poles with their wings. The poles were so long that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen from outside. They are there to this day. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets, which Moses had placed there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the people of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. When the priests came out of the holy place, the cloud filled the house of the Lord. The priests were not able to take their positions to minister in the presence of the cloud, because the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. Then Solomon said, the Lord had said that he dwells in thick darkness. I've truly built a majestic house for you, a place for you to dwell forever. Then the king turned and blessed the whole congregation of Israel, while the whole congregation of Israel was standing there. Then Solomon said, blessed is the Lord, the God of Israel. When he said with his mouth to my father David, he has fulfilled with his hand. The Lord said, from the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I did not choose a city from all the tribes of Israel in which to build a house for my name to be there, nor did I choose any man to be a leader over my people Israel. But now I have chosen Jerusalem for my name to be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people Israel. It was on my father David's heart to build a house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. However, the Lord said to my father David, it was on your heart to build a house for my name. It was a good thing to desire, but you will not build the house. Your son, who will come from your own body, will build the house for my name. So the Lord kept his word which he had spoken, and I arose in the place of my father David. I am seated on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord said. I have built this house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. I have established a place there for the ark, which contains the covenant of the Lord, which he made with our fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Then Solomon stood in front of the altar in the presence of the whole congregation of Israel, and spread out his hands toward heaven. He said, O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in the heavens above or on the earth below. You keep the covenant of mercy and faithfulness with your servants, who walk before you with all their heart. You have kept the word which you spoke to your servant, my father David, which you have said with your mouth, you have fulfilled with your hand, as it is today. Now, Lord God of Israel, guard for your servant, my father David, the promise you made to him when you said, you will never fail to have a man sitting on the throne of Israel in my presence, if your sons guard their ways by walking in my law, just as you have walked before me. Now, O God of Israel, let the words which you spoke to your servant, my father David, be confirmed. But will God really dwell on the earth? In truth, the heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this house which I have built? But turn your face toward the prayer of your servant and toward his plea for mercy. O Lord my God, listen to the cry and the prayer which your servant offers before you today. Let your eyes be open toward this house day and night, toward this place where you said, my name will be there, to hear the prayer which your servant offers toward this place. When you hear the plea for mercy of your servant and of your people Israel, which they pray toward this place, then hear in your dwelling place in heaven, hear and forgive.
Okay. So this is probably the highlight, the high point, in many ways, of the books of Kings, is when Solomon is building the temple. In verse 6, where did the priests bring the Ark of the Covenant?
The most holy place.
The most holy place. And then verse 10 and 11, what filled the new covenant?
Cloud.
The thick cloud. Where have we heard this before? And it's the dark cloud containing the glory of the Lord, to be specific. Where have we heard this before?
When the people were leaving Egypt.
And specifically,
Cloud went before.
right. So we have all the cloud going throughout Exodus. But where does the cloud, the thick cloud, fill an area to the point where the priest can't go in anymore? At the consecration of the tabernacle, when it was being set up initially, and at the end of Exodus, in Exodus chapter 40, verses 34 to 38. In verses 17 and 20, who specifically is the temple being built for? The name of the Lord, the God of Israel.
Is that the Yahweh or whichever form that they were never supposed to speak?
Yeah. So again, when we have the all caps, it's in your translations, that is Yahweh there. And so we're going to see this reference a number of times because now is the high point, and after this, it's a constant refrain about the sinfulness of the kings of Israel, is how they've desecrated the temple the temple where the name of the Lord lives. So there is a little bit of a personification, or when the name of the Lord is being used, sometimes, not always, it appears as a hypostatization of the word we threw at you before, where it takes on the personal characteristics of God. So here it's living or being in a place is the name of the Lord, and it's living in the temple, or dwelling in the temple, or being there in the temple. The name is there. So usually when you talk, my name is Seth, my name doesn't go and visit places on its own. But here we have language where it appears to be talking about God in a way that it's the name being and doing the things. Let's see, I think we're at the end of our time. If anyone has any question about where we're at, or the temple. Yep. Quick one. All right. Well,
Historical reference questions.
all right. Let's close with prayer. Father in heaven, we come to you in prayer, and we thank you for the gift of your presence in our lives. We thank you for your acts of love and mercy and salvation for your people in the Old Testament as well as throughout history.